One of the best things that singers can do to help themselves progress at a faster pace and in a steadier manner is to be really smart and organized when it comes to their practice times. So today I'm going to share with you some tips and some strategies for ensuring that you get the most out of your private practice sessions. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that our minds and our bodies are prepared for that practice session. So that means getting a good night's sleep the night before. It's a lot easier for us to be able to properly energize our voices and to also be able to mentally focus on learning new coordinations when we're well rested. And we want to make sure that we're hydrating throughout the day. We don't want to allow ourselves to get to the point where we're dehydrated and having to chug water throughout our practice session. It's too late by then. Our vocal folds are already probably a little bit dry, and that's going to slow down our progress and make it harder for us to be able to learn the coordination and technique that we want to learn. So the next thing we want to do is try to eliminate or at least reduce the distractions around us. So that could mean practicing at a time when nobody else is in the house. If you don't have that luxury, let's say your children are with you, then set them up with something that's going to occupy them for the duration of your practice. If you have social media notifications on your phone or your laptop, turn them off. Even if you're not responding to them, even if you're not looking at those notifications, just that little ringing of the bell is enough to be a distraction. It gets you thinking, what am I missing? So to the very best of your ability, you want to reduce as much of the distraction as possible. And when you're planning your practice sessions, try to schedule them at times during the day when your voice is the most awake and pliable. So for example, I find that my voice just seems to be the most awake and is the easiest to get going and to jump into singing late in the afternoon and the early evening. And that's because I've been using my voice all day and all the gunk from my allergies and my postnasal drip is all kind of cleared out by then. And I've been singing a little bit during the day with the lessons and talking with my students. And so my voice is already ready to go. And that is actually going to save me a ton of time when it comes to warming up. And so because I don't have a lot of time for practicing, I have to be very streamlined in my practice sessions. I have to make sure, and this is the next point, I go in with a plan in mind. I know exactly what it is that I'm planning to practice. Some singers really benefit from having a list on a chalkboard, for example, things that they can just check off, or songs that they might be working on, or vocal phrases that they need to specifically work on, or certain techniques that they need to focus on. And that really helps them to sort of organize and really see very clearly, have a vision of what it is that they need to practice. So when we're going into the practice session with a clear plan in mind, we want to know exactly what it is that we're planning to practice, which songs we're planning to practice, which exercises, which techniques. And then we want to set up our instruments to be able to make those sounds. Now I have certain exercises that I use for setting up my instruments to make certain sounds. So let's say I'm singing musical theater. It's a brighter sound, I need a little bit more twang, and so I have certain go-to exercises that I use that get me there toward that sound, move me toward making that sound a lot faster. But then if I'm singing pop or rock, I'm not going to have quite the same vocal tract setup. And so I use exercises and warm-ups that are going to help me make those sounds for pop and rock instead. And that saves me a lot of time. And that means that sometimes, some days, I'm only singing musical theater because then I can kind of streamline that approach a little bit. And some days I'm only singing pop. You need to know what it is that you need to practice, and then you prioritize. Most of us don't have unlimited time in the day to be able to practice. We've only got a certain amount of time. And so we have to try to fit everything that we need to fit into in that practice session. So if we prioritize, if we focus on the things specifically that we need to work on, whether it's a song or a vocal phrase or a specific skill, then that's going to help us streamline our practice. It means that we're going to be wasting less time just sort of flailing about, meandering, not knowing, not going in with a clear picture of what we need to practice in mind. And this is where assessing your own vocal skills is going to be of tremendous importance to you, because once you have an idea of what your skill set is and the areas that you need to keep focusing on, that's going to help guide your practice times. It's going to help you determine what it is that is a priority in your vocal training. You also want to make sure that you have all of the materials that you need to have a good practice, whether that's water or sheet music that you're working from, or a computer with all of the sound files prepared, karaoke tracks all set up, speakers all set up, an instrument, having it tuned and ready, everything that you need to be able to have an effective practice. Everything is ready to go so that you're not wasting valuable, precious practice time trying to organize things. Oh, I forgot my drink. Run back to the kitchen. Oh, I forgot to do this, right? Have it all set up. Have a plan. If it helps, have a checklist. If you have a plan in mind, knowing exactly what it is that you need to practice, and have a little checklist, you're not going to forget things and find that you have to go back later on and get them. Now, one important skill for singers when we're practicing is to know when to take a break or to move on to something else. And this is really hard for a lot of singers because sometimes we like to dig our heels in and we become very determined to succeed at a given task. But sometimes it's okay to walk away, either for a few minutes to go take the dog out for a walk, just to kind of refresh our minds, to be able to find a different headspace or get ourselves into a different headspace. Sometimes it might be taking a break for the rest of the day and coming back to things tomorrow when we're refreshed and we're feeling not so frustrated or discouraged. Because when we start to get to the point where we're feeling frustrated and discouraged, it actually impedes our progress. It's going to make it more difficult for us to try to learn the skills that we need to learn. So it's better sometimes to come in with a fresh mind and a healthier attitude or mindset than to keep sort of, I hate to use the term, but kind of beating a dead horse. Just kind of doing the same things over and over and over again and really not finding yourselves getting anywhere. Or you might decide that your time is better spent moving on to a different task, a different song, a different exercise. Know when it's wise to move on, when it's ultimately going to be more productive and it's going to be time better spent than feeling like you're just kind of stuck in a rut and not able to get out of it. Move on to something else that's ultimately going to kind of unlock things for you. And know when to persist. Know how to recognize the signs that you're actually on the right track and that you'll get there if you just keep persisting a little bit more. Don't be afraid to keep drilling the same vocal phrase, for example, over and over and over again if you find that doing so is actually productive and not discouraging. If it's actually bringing you toward the right sound and not leading you away from it. Know when to try a completely different approach, whether that's a different method or a different technique or a completely different sound. That means improvisation. And I do plan to record a video on this topic of improvisation and voice training. Sometimes we just need to do something a little bit out there, something a little unexpected, something a little bit different from the regular routine. Sometimes switching things up, switching tracks, trying something completely different outside of the norm can actually help to release things for you. It can help you to find something that the way that you've been trying so far has failed to help you find. You also want to learn to pace your practice times well. If you only have, let's say, 30 minutes of focused practice a day, then you want to prioritize and you want to make sure that you're giving yourself adequate time to work on the things that you're trying to work on. So that means not spending 25 minutes doing a warm-up and then only having 5 minutes at the end to rush through a song or two. You want to make sure that you pace your practice times effectively, even if that means, and what's the expression, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul? So maybe that means that you do your warm-ups on your drive home from work so that when you get home and you have only that 30 minutes, that you can then focus more on learning technique, learning new songs. You want to make sure that you give yourself adequate time to reach your goals. Now, although you do want to go in with the plan in mind, you also want to be flexible enough to be able to adjust that plan on the spot. Should you find that, for example, you're making real progress with a given technique or a sound, and you feel as though spending the entire practice or 30 minutes of that practice focusing on that specific sound or drilling a phrase over and over and over again will actually set you on the right track and help you reach that goal, help you learn that technique, help you achieve that sound. Be willing to do that if you feel as though it's time well spent, it's time that's actually moving you in the right direction. So you want to be flexible and kind of go with the flow, but not flaky and disorganized. You want to make sure that you're able to recognize those times when maybe you do need to spend a little bit more time on a given skill or stick with something a little bit longer because you're on the right track and you're so close. And you want to be flexible enough to kind of switch tracks or switch gears. And that flexibility, I think, is showing a lot more of a responsiveness. It's really listening to your body, listening to your voice on a given day or at a given time, and it's being willing to let it kind of tell you how it wants to learn on a given day or what its needs are. Hopefully this video has given you some strategies and ideas for organizing your practice times and getting the most out of them, even when those practice times are kind of limited and sporadic. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you later.